So, what I want to talk about now is the distinction between hearing speech as audible versus hearing speech as intelligible. Now, audible means that the speech is heard, you're hearing it, but not clearly enough to distinguish specific speech sounds. Now, audibility is carried primarily by the vowels. 250 and 500 hertz carry 90% of the power of speech, but only 10% of the clarity. So speech, the power of speech is in the vowels. On the other hand, intelligibility, which are word sound distinctions, that's carried by consonants. 2,000, 4,000 hertz and higher carry 90% of the meaning of speech, but only 10% of the power. So if I whisper, which takes out the fundamental frequency, which is the dominant power of speech, you can still hear me. You can still distinguish what I'm saying, but it's very, very soft, very soft. But the clarity, the intelligibility is there. So intelligibility is carried by consonants. Power is carried by vowels. Now, in the speech spectrum, vowels have a very long wavelength. So vowels go under furniture, around barriers. Consonants, with their short little wavelengths, bounce off of barriers. So when you have noise, it's mostly low frequency dominant in terms of the speech characteristics that are available, because those long wavelengths will manage themselves within an environment, but the consonants, the meaning units, are the ones that are obscured. Those little tiny wavelengths get trapped in the carpet fibers. They get bounced off of barriers like bodies and heads and chairs. So in a room, it's the consonants or meaning units that are compromised. Now, when you have top-down capacity, you fill in the gaps of those consonants because you know where they are and what they should be. But if you don't have the top-down capacity, then you miss an enormous amount of meaning. A sound system, as you can hear, emphasizes the higher frequencies so that those consonants stand out. What I want to do is play a CD. It's from the American Academy of Audiology. And there's two reasons I want to play it. One is to illustrate the distinction between speech being heard as audible versus speech being heard as intelligible. And the second reason is to experience for yourself the value of top-down processing. The value of when you have information in your brain, you can tolerate a very deficient signal. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to turn this on, low tech, because this I can count on usually to work. Usually. Let's see what we have here.
Now let's talk about frequency range and hearing. You may think that when someone has a hearing loss, he or she hears sounds less loudly. If this were the case, the problem could be solved by asking people to talk louder. But hearing loss is not that simple. Typically, hearing loss is more severe at some frequencies than at others. People with a hearing loss often have trouble hearing the high-pitched sounds. In the next demonstration, you will experience speech as it would sound if you had some high-frequency hearing loss yourself. You will hear 4 sentences. However, they will not sound normal to you, since some of the high-frequency tones have been filtered out. See if you can understand all 4 of the sentences. Here we go. Number 1. Let's ride our bikes this evening. Number 2. Those cookies are delicious. Number 3. How do you spell your name? Number 4. I like the colors in that jacket.
Okay, was that audible? Entirely. Intelligible? No. See the distinction? None of the low frequencies were filtered out. 250, 500, 750 hertz, most of 1,000, all there, but none of the highs. That's how critical those weak consonant sounds are. And those are the ones that are most at risk in a classroom environment. Now, what did you understand? Right, number 1, number 2. Did you receive more acoustic energy for number 1 and number 2 than what the clause was? No. So how did you know? Because you've had experience with numbering, and your brain could therefore fill in the gaps. You knew what that was. You didn't have a lot of acoustic information, but you had a top to help you out. If you had had no experience with numbering, you wouldn't know what that was either. It was your prior exposure and knowledge that allowed you to complete that information. However, you had no prior experience with what the sentence was following the number, right? So you can't complete what you don't know. Well, now you're going to know it. We're going to do some pre-tutoring, which is one of the most important accommodations we can do for children with hearing loss, auditory processing, attending, cognitive issues, is teach in advance topics and critical words, and depending on the child, how much information. So we put something in their intrinsic system that they can draw on. Now, we never want to leave anyone hearing that poorly, ever. But sometimes the signal, the extrinsic signal, is poor. So our job is to strengthen that intrinsic capacity. So you're going to be pre-tutored, and then I'm going to play the filtered sentences again. Don't write down when they're intact. This is also part of your short-term memory retrieval issue. But just see, once we give your brain something to work with, if you can then handle that very muddy extrinsic signal.
Well, how did you do? You probably had a little trouble understanding what was said, because some of the high frequencies were missing. Now, listen to the same sentences, but this time without any filtering. The sentences should sound normal to you. Number 1. Let's ride our bikes this evening. Number 2. Those cookies are delicious. Number 3. How do you spell your name? Number 4. I like the colors in that jacket. That was better, wasn't it? It's much easier to understand speech when you can hear the full range of frequencies. Number 1. Let's ride our bikes this evening. Number 2. Those cookies are delicious. Number 3. How do you spell your name? Number 4. I like the colors in that jacket.
So, how'd you do? Did you do a little better? Some of you may have needed a little more tutoring. But yeah. But the point is, did your brain receive any more bottom-up acoustic information the second time? No, it didn't. Bottom-up was the same. What was the difference? Your top-down capacity. That was the difference. See, that's the difference it makes when you have something to work with. So the more information our children have, the more they have to work with, the more they bring to the learning situation. And there are children who need more redundancy. They need to hear information more than once. They're at a big advantage if they know what's coming up, they know the topic, they know the words. So then when they go in class and learn the information in the classroom, they actually can bring something in real time to the learning environment. They can contribute. They know what's going on instead of spending the whole instructional time trying to figure out what's happening. So that's what happens when we want to improve the extrinsic signal to give the child the best intrinsic capacity to work with. So speech intelligibility depends on the level of the talker's voice. Certainly it's a louder, clearer level now than it is here. Level of the voice reduces intelligibility. When the level of my voice drops, that reduces intelligibility. And what about the hearing of the listener? That makes a difference. Do you have any hearing loss? The distance between talker and listener. Physically, the closer I am, even without a mic, the better you're going to hear me, because I'm close to you. But I'm not close to you. So physical distance does make a difference. The thing in a classroom is you can't use physical distance for acoustic control, because if I say, you are so important, I'll be here all day. Who were the rest of you? Chopped liver? You know, as an expression. So the point is, it's not possible in a classroom to use physical proximity as a measure of acoustic accessibility for everyone in the room. So we need to have a technological solution for that. So distance and any intervening objects. Now remember, the reason intervening objects are a problem for intelligibility is what speech sounds are deflected by objects? Consonants. The short wavelengths of high frequencies are deflected by objects, not the vowels. Those long wavelengths go over and around and under. But the short little wavelengths of those high frequency consonant sounds, they are deflected by objects.